All right. Well, hello and welcome everyone to our VantagePoint training session here live on YouTube. So excited to have everyone joining us today. If you could just do me a quick, big favor, if before we get started, just to make sure everyone can hear me kind of loud and clear and that we are kind of ready to rock and roll through our session today, because we're certainly going to be moving pretty quickly, and kind of like some of the moves we're going to look at today with this incredibly, high volatility, and looking for, really great breakouts within the markets, how to find those types of opportunities in the markets, and really just help you identify better possibly entry timing as well, using the artificial intelligence here in VantagePoint. But also, if you're not a VantagePoint user, let me know down in the comments section, so we can certainly cover some tips and tricks that might help you in your individual trade plan as well. Of course, keep in mind, I'm not a licensed advisor, so I won't be telling you how to trade, but certainly helping you to identify opportunities that could have some, massive gains over, the next couple of days, weeks, however long that trend runs. So we'll be diving into that and identifying those potential entry timing for new trends. So let me know down in the comments section. So again, I know who I'm chatting with here during our session, and we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna just jump on over to my VantagePoint screen here so everybody can see exactly what I'm seeing. And the basis of the entries, or anyone's entry, really should be timing and direction, right? That's two of the key components that most traders struggle with the most. So I'm sure that some of you have had some struggles with timing, whether you've gotten in too early or whether you've gotten out too late, or on that entry, maybe you've entered in maybe too late after the run has already occurred. In fact, let's just do a quick little poll here. Who has had really the most trouble with their entries, either entering in too early or maybe getting in too late after that run has already happened? Let me know kind of what camp you fall in. Some may say both, right? It's happened on both sides of the spectrum as well. And for those of you who are giving me ticker symbols, I appreciate that, and I will keep those in mind. I am going to be asking for those throughout our session, so pay careful attention when I do ask for those ticker symbols, because we'll certainly want to dive on into that live analysis with you guys as well, using the artificial intelligence. So just looking at some of the chat here, guys, thanks for joining us today. Hey, George. Hey, Ace. Thank you so much. So glad to have you guys joining us today. So let's go ahead and jump on into our VantagePoint software. All right. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Nikki. I'm our head trainer here at VantagePoint. And so, I work in the software and in the markets every single day, teaching traders, just how to have more confidence in the technical analysis. And so that's what we're here to help you guys with today. Again, whether you're a VantagePoint user or not, you'll get a lot out of today's session, I am sure. So diving into our charts here, because I know that's what you guys are kind of on the edge of your seat for, there are several key components that we're going to be looking at for full confirmation, whether that be entry or management or exit. So let's talk and focus primarily on the entries, because identifying big breakout moves and knowing when to enter is, again, where I do see a lot of traders struggle. And so really the first components that we're going to be looking for is going to be what we would call the 4 points of confirmation. And so the 4 points of confirmation consist of a crossover, and that's our crossover that you'll see right here. I'm just going to pull up my pen so we can all take a look at that together. But you can see our crossover where the blue line crosses over the black. That's our green trend is starting, which means green for bullish expectation. Now, VantagePoint is actually doing so much on the back end, kind of behind the scenes. The artificial intelligence is working. That's the beautiful thing about artificial intelligence, is that well, it just kind of does the work for you and you don't really have to think about it. And so your artificial intelligence is at work saying, hey, based on the intermarket analysis, which is VantagePoint's patented process of analyzing the markets that are driving other markets, such as Amex that we're looking at right here. We've got American Express pulled up on the screen. And so based on that artificial intelligence, that neural network analysis, we can see that we do have that bullish crossover here. So that's the first point of confirmation. The next step is even easier, looking at price action. In fact, that predictive price action, looking at that neural index, we can see that that indication is also bullish. So we're just kind of running down the line here. And then the next piece would be looking for the predictive differences, which really equate to the strength of a trend. Okay, so we do have some, vernacular that some of you might be familiar with if you are a VantagePoint user. If you're not, that's okay. Ask the question in the chat. I'm going to keep an eye on it throughout this session. So certainly let me know if you do have questions about anything that we're reviewing as we're reviewing it, so we can take a little deeper dive and make sure that you get as much out of this session as possible. So those are 3 points of confirmation that we've looked at so far. Again, let's review the crossover, the neural index, and then our predictive differences as well. So then our 4th point of confirmation is actually on a daily basis, VantagePoint's going to give you that predictive trading range. So yes, the predictive trading range is going to give you the expected range of movement for that stock throughout the course of the day, whether it be a stock or a Forex pair or a cryptocurrency, an ETF. No matter the asset, you're going to have these 4 points of confirmation to give you confidence in the shift within the trend or signaling a potential entry. So it really just boils down to, do these 4 points of confirmation give you confidence to take the position? And so here we can see we did have that alignment as well as predictive trading candle on that day back here that would give us that confirming potential bullish trend is beginning. So as a trader, maybe you decide to take that move. And so of course, just managing that position all the way through, running that all the way as long as that blue line stays above the black. Again, this jumps more into position management here, but again, simple as that. As long as the blue line stays above the black, when that blue line starts to cross back over, again, confirmation to the downside here. Now we're just inverting that move. And so if you short the market, fantastic. You have another potential opportunity here. If you don't, that's okay too, right? Now you know that maybe an exit strategy might be on the horizon. So helping you on the entry, the management, and the exit using those 4 points of confirmation. Now, volatility also plays a huge role in helping us to better understand the potential for breakouts, as does momentum. So a little later, we may get into some volatility and some momentum indicators that have predictive data built into them, which is a little bit more advanced. So we're going to start out basic here, but certainly coming on forward through today, looking at potential for entries. And so for a bullish expectation, what would we want to see? And here we can see that we do have the blue line crossing above the black line, giving us that trend confirmation of bullishness. Then we also see the neural index is also bullish as well. So we've got nice bullish confirmation on that front. And then if you look down at your predictive differences, or those strength indicator, you can see that we also have that bullish expectation there as well. So check 1, 2, 3 so far. What's our 4th and final point of confirmation? And that would be our predictive trade candle right here. And beautiful thing is that it's color coded for you. So if you see green, green is bullish in VantagePoint. All right. So if we see the top of that trading candle is shaded in green, that's going to give us a bullish high expectation, meaning the high is expected to be higher than yesterday. All right. And then of course, same scenario down here with the low, with it shaded in green, the low is then expected to be higher than yesterday. So we're taking today's expected highs and lows and comparing it to the previous day to see, do we have continual price action expecting to push us in a more bullish front? And of course we do here, right? So this is, again, really as simple as it can be. Check 1, 2, 3, 4 for those points of confirmation for that bullish movement. And so, lo and behold, everybody can look and see what American Express did today. But keep in mind, for those of you who do not have VantagePoint, you guys are going to get this the night before. So VantagePoint users were seeing this actually last night at 6:30 p.m., being able to prepare and plan for their trade day ahead. All right. So you can really be, on the front line of timing your entry. So you're not waiting for that confirmation of price action and just trying to follow behind it. You actually do have a proactive approach that says, hey, the artificial intelligence, the neural networks in VantagePoint are forecasting this bullish expectation. So you can better time your entry so you're not on the late side, but also have confidence so you're not getting in too early either. Now, of course, there's, never a perfect system, anywhere in the market. So, you can still have some losses even with the edge that the software provides, but, significantly increasing your odds with that up to 87.4% accuracy here on our 4 points of confirmation. So let's move on to another market. In fact, I'll just take one somebody had asked earlier. So I'll just get a few. Ace, let's see. Sure, absolutely. We can certainly take a look. I'm just jumping back through our chat to make sure that I don't miss anything. So we'll jump on into a couple here. This is probably one of my favorite things to do, is just pull up markets with you guys and do a run through and some analysis to see where are some things happening on that front for today. So if we take a look, someone had typed in CCL, so we'll just pull that up and go through our analysis together. All right. Now, you'll notice that my chart does look a little different on this screen, and that's because I've added support and resistance to the chart as well. So support and resistance, let me ask, just quick show of hands if you could, who is familiar with support and resistance? And yes, I can zoom in a little bit further if I need to, guys, so you can see it. But let me know if you are familiar with support and resistance, or if you just have no idea what support and resistance is, or maybe you've heard of it and just don't know how to use it. Let me know so we can walk through that together. So with support and resistance, we'll just do a quick overview here. Support and resistance is really going to be kind of this supply and demand concept. So think of these as a simple pivot point for price. And so oftentimes we'll see support and resistance levels start to get closer and closer together. And that's what happens typically when we see a channel like this. Well, the good thing and the good news is that after a channel, we'll usually see some sort of breakout, right? We can actually see that happening right here where we had this channel of support and resistance. And I'll just kind of draw some lines. I'm not the best at drawing straight lines, but VantagePoint does that for me. So I usually don't have to, but just to kind of highlight the support and resistance points, here's your resistance where these downward red arrows are pushing down on price. This really is kind of trying to keep price as far down as possible, right? It's kind of that downward pressure. Whereas support has this upward pressure on price. And you can see that it does create this channel that price just likes to bounce back and forth between. And so at some point, price is going to likely break out. Really, what this is just kind of compressing price. Well, you can only compress something so long before you kind of have this spring action. So I like to think of that as like a spring, if you will. So when you compress a spring, and eventually when you let it go, what happens? It just pings off, right? Well, that's exactly what happens with price here. So our first indication of that breakout, and I want you guys to remember this for future analysis on the charts as we go through today's session, but our first indication of that potential breakout is our crossover and our 4 points of confirmation, okay? So yes, we do have that. But the additional piece here is that we have two closes above the resistance. And so I'm just going to clear off my wonderful drawing skills there, right? And you can see that the close, which is the top of that green candle, the top of the body, that big box of the green candle, is above the resistance level. And we, in fact, have a secondary close above that resistance level the next day. So 2 consecutive closes above a resistance level will signify a higher potential for a bullish breakout. In fact, that really verifies the break of that resistance, and then we can see that rapid price movement from there. So if you take a look at just kind of where we got from our crossover up to where we hit the next resistance, and maybe you didn't get out on that day, maybe you got stopped out the next day, that's fine. We'll just patronize it a little bit, right? Because no perfect system. But in 6 days to have, 8.75, call it 8.75% move, everybody's results are going to vary a little bit depending upon, your price of entry and where you got in or got out and how you managed it from there. But just looking at that breakout from our 4 points of confirmation, confirming that break of resistance can really lead to some very consistent results and some big profit potential as well. And that's more of a swing, a shorter term swing type move. And that's what VantagePoint is designed for. So again, did we have our 4 points of confirmation? Absolutely, right? And then of course, we also saw that we had our break of the resistance level as well. All right. And that was after a pullback. So that's the other thing we're going to be talking about today is that pullback. And the question, I think, where we are on CCL, and correct me if this is not the question that was on for this chart, but we have a pullback coming, right? Or we have a pullback that's already started. And so with that pullback, would we expect to see bullish movement within the price? Are we going to be able to break out of this channel that we're in? That's why I wanted to point out the one previously. Hopefully you guys see it now, right? Is it more clear? That channel that we've got into within CCL. And again, price is just ping-ponging back and forth between those support and resistance levels. So what are we bouncing off of now? We're bouncing off of, everybody say it with me, right? Support. So as you approach support, you have to look to see what's the likelihood of breaking out and through that support. Do we have 2 closes below that level? The answer is no, right? I think everybody should be able to clearly see. And if you can't, you know what? I'm just going to zoom on in nice and close so we can get a good look at it. You can see that there is no close below that most recent support level. All right. Now, let's take a look down at some other indications here, because our price action is in fact expected to be bullish for the next 2 days. And again, this was the forecast last night. And so with a pullback down to support, this is another kind of strategic type setup where if you like to trade in between support and resistance levels, you can find these opportunities very readily in the markets. And you can even use VantagePoint Screener, which is called IntelliScan, to help you identify areas that are between support and resistance and just bouncing back and forth. And so as we approach support, do we have enough to push us through? Our closes say no. Price says, nope, this level is too strong. We're not likely to be able to break through it. So then the other option is to bounce back up to try to retest resistance. And I believe that's what happened today on CCL. And VantagePoint would have guided you towards that path because, again, your neural index is bullish, right? And you can even see your predictive differences down at the bottom of the screen starting to round over. So before they were going down pretty nice and steep, right? And now they're starting to level off. So you can also, again, we have that support level, but keep in mind VantagePoint's customizable. So you could also take a look at what we would call the triple cross. We have different timing indicators here in VantagePoint, so different crossovers. Each trader are going to use them respective to their own trade style. We're not here to tell you exactly what to trade or what to do. Manage your money the way you see fit, because your trade style is as unique as you. All right. Everyone's going to trade a chart a little differently, and that's okay, right? There's no right, wrong, or indifferent, but we certainly want to make sure that you're on the right side of the move. Okay, so if you take a look at the shorter term crossover and the medium term crossover, these are going to be the most sensitive. The short term is going to look out just 1 day. The medium term is going to look out 2 days. The long term will look out 3 days. So yes, out in the future, 3 days for that trend expectation. And then our triple cross, which is the one I mentioned, I'm going to just go ahead and plug this in here. You can see is built up of 3 predictive exponential moving averages. All right. So for all of my, kind of math geeks out there, 3 predictive exponential moving averages on the screen at the same time to help you better understand the integrity of the current trend. And you'll notice that this is color coded. So when we see green within the current trend, that's going to give us that nice, strong, bullish expectation. But notice that after that breakout we saw previously, we get to a point where after that high volatility breakout, price has to sort of rest and reset, and that's where that pullback comes into play. All right. So if you're approaching that resistance level, you may want to wait if you missed the initial breakout, right? Because the likelihood of a pullback, if price is really far overextended at an extreme, and take a look here, guys, your predictive differences, that strength starts to weaken. All right. So again, if you like to short the market, well, hey, guess what? You have a level to short as well, because you're bouncing off of resistance and profit target at support, right? So taking a look now at the predictive differences measuring the strength within the bullish trend, we can see that bounce off of support on up to resistance, that bounce back down to support, again, that pullback, and then jumping back up. So looking at our current indication, we were expecting bullish price action today with an unlikelihood of breaking through or down through that support level. So would a bounce be kind of likely on CCL? I would say now it's pretty clear that we would expect some possible bullishness from CCL today with the potential bounce. Now, I also pulled up that triple cross because I want everyone to take a nice, good, close look at that T-cross long level. So the T-cross long is kind of the most conservative, predictive, exponential moving average we have on the screen currently. And so this is actually an 18-day predictive exponential moving average. And what that tells you is that it is, again, pulling in all of the data from the neural networks and the artificial intelligence to give you a really dynamic level of additional support. And notice we really are just riding right along that line. We haven't really been able to break below it, right? Not 2 consecutive days. So this again tells us that we have not only one level of support here that's holding strong, but 2 levels of support. So likelihood of a potential bounce, or at least not being able to push any further, is probably pretty high in this case. So, do with that information as you will, but certainly take that into account when you're strategizing a move as well. So did that answer your questions on CCL? I know a couple of people had typed that into the chat today, so I just wanted to make sure that we answered all of those questions. And also, too, if you need more information, maybe you don't know about VantagePoint, or maybe you don't know enough about VantagePoint, go to VantagePointForecast.com. I know we'll drop that in the chat for you as well. But please be sure to, give yourself the best advantage in the markets, because we know that there's certainly a lot of opportunity, but you got to be careful as well. So manage that risk and manage the reward. Let's jump on into another market here. Now, of course, you can kind of sense a theme too. So the higher volatility markets that we saw some really good breakouts on and were expected to break out today, Amex, MasterCard, Citigroup. We also saw some big things moving in the quantum area of the markets as well. Who likes quantum stocks? Give me a thumbs up or something, right? If you like to trade the quantum stocks. So it's kind of like the next big thing after AI, right? Now, I say that because VantagePoint's been using artificial intelligence for decades. So I know it's kind of newer to a lot of people, but here at VantagePoint, we're very familiar with artificial intelligence. We've been using it in the markets for decades. So just let me know. We'll take a look at some quantum stocks as well. But let's take a look at another breakout that VantagePoint identified 2 days ago, which was MasterCard. And you can see, again, you will have some additional indicators that you can choose to add on in VantagePoint. But as we saw on some of the previous charts, the basic indicators in VantagePoint, those 4 points of confirmation, including the crossover timing on that 1, 2, 3, and the triple cross, are of course standard in VantagePoint, as well as, the other 4 points of confirmation. But always wanting to stay on the cutting edge of innovation. So we have taken things like momentum and volatility and kind of supercharged it with artificial intelligence as well, just to make sure that our traders have the best of the best. So as we can see, I'm just going to let everybody just walk me through this. I'm going to switch on over to our shorter term crossover. So if you want to identify breakouts, it's oftentimes really beneficial to get into that trade as kind of early as possible. And so if we take a look at our first confirmation point, we really see that happening on 9/16. So you'll notice I switched over to a shorter term crossover. Now, what that boils down to is essentially it's going to be more sensitive, right? Anytime you have a shorter time period that's being evaluated, it's going to make that indicator, that technical analysis, more sensitive to the price movement. And so when you think of shorter periods, think more sensitive or earlier signals. Longer periods are going to be more conservative, signals in the markets, giving you kind of more strength and confirmation there as well. So if you notice, this is our shortest time frame. This is the short-term crossover looking out 1 day. And we have that blue line crossing over the black line. Again, the trend has turned green here. Now, I pick out this point because this is really where we have full confirmation. You do this enough and your eyes just immediately get drawn to those 4 points of confirmation. So walk through it with me here. We've got our crossover. We've got our bullish neural index. And then, of course, we also have our bullish predictive differences as well. And so with all of that confirmation, now we can start to assess from a deeper level of understanding how fast would we expect this to move. And that's kind of where momentum and volatility comes into play, because volatility, what I find is a lot of traders think volatility and they think, oh my gosh, fear, right? Well, that's not necessarily true. Volatility can also lend itself really well to movement. And that's exactly what volatility is the price fluctuation within an asset or within the market. And so if you're on the right side of volatility, it can be very lucrative, but that's the key, is making sure that you're on the right side and timing it properly. So that way you're jumping on the train before it leaves the station and not trying to run after it. So we've got our 4 points of confirmation here, again, with that predictive trading range as well. And so at this time, yes, David, I see you. And yes, we absolutely will. Thank you for that. NVIDIA. All right. I'm sorry. I forget. Sometimes I get so into the charts that I forget to look at the chat. So I've got to go back through sometime. So be patient with me, guys. I'm just making sure that, that I didn't miss anything. So perfect. All right. So jumping on into the next piece, we've talked about support and resistance, right? So do we have enough strength to push us through a resistance level? And, according to our 4 points of confirmation, yes, right? But I also know that, just working with many traders, that we do also have traders that like even more confirmation. And that's great, because momentum can really help you better understand the possibility of that breakout as you're up against resistance. Because at this point, we actually don't have two closes above that resistance level. So we don't have kind of a confirmed break of that resistance. We're really just trying to stack the odds of the potential to break through that resistance level. And so for something like that, you may want to have more confirmation and strength pushing price through that level. And so you can see we've got the neural strength index. That's the white line. Some of you VantagePoint users might see it as the blue line. I just like the white line. I can change the colors in my VantagePoint. So can you if you have VantagePoint already. So you can customize it, however your heart desires. But looking at that neural strength indicator, you can see that price action is actually accelerating. Think of that as the gas pedal for price, right? So are we stepping on the gas or are we letting off the gas? And so, yes, we in fact see that we're just mashing that pedal down to the floorboards, and we are seeing some rapid acceleration within price expected over the next 2 days. And so we can see that's exactly what happened, and it continued today since our reading for last night. For today was in fact still continuing that bullish expectation. So that's the neural strength index that lays right over top of that neural index itself. And then we can also move down to our momentum. I'm just going to minimize some of these momentum indicators. Again, if you're familiar with momentum, you'll know what most of those are. If you're not, let me know in the chat. Do you trade with momentum? I'd love to know who's using that regularly in their trade strategy. So it can definitely give you a lot of confidence. Again, these are all very different aspects of looking at the trend. So we've got our trend timing indicators, we've got price, we've got strength, we've got support and resistance, and now we're looking at momentum. And what these various indicators do is it helps you to form a really kind of well-rounded narrative on what's expected to happen. It kind of gives you the full story, that big picture look, rather than just trying to pinpoint and focus on one point where you're not seeing that big picture. So taking a look at momentum here, RSI is a very simple momentum indicator, but very, very powerful. And so oftentimes the most powerful things are the most simple because they're easy to use. And so you can see that this is a predictive RSI for those of you who are familiar, but it measures the momentum of price, basically, measuring that strength of the continued trend. And so as you see that blue line coming up, that's going to signal a bullish expectation from that technical indicator RSI. And that's the relative strength index, if anybody wants to go do a little bit more research on that later. But it is in fact powered by artificial intelligence here in VantagePoint. So the next piece is stochastics. Now, stochastics is a crossover. All right, so similar to what you're already used to seeing on the chart on the left-hand side, but stochastics is a momentum indicator, and it uses a crossover to measure that momentum. And so what you see is this yellow line crossing over the black line. And so notice when that happens, this is signaling the potential for bullish momentum. And so where we see those two happening simultaneously, you've got really good confirmation from a momentum standpoint that the likelihood of coming down to test that support or break down below that support level, probably not going to happen. Why? Because we've got a shift coming with our momentum indicators. And I'll just hover over that price movement right here. So you can see as we come down and touch that support level, our momentum is already shifting. I'm going to just remove my line. You can see stochastics is already starting to close the gap here. So again, unless you have very, very, very bearish confirmation that we're going to continue to push through that support, you'd be very cautious here. If you're in a short position, maybe you think about taking profits there as well, or maybe you think about shifting the direction of your trade so you can be on the right side of that momentum. So as we continue, when we get that crossover here, right? Well, do we have bullish momentum? And the answer is yes, right? We in fact do have bullish momentum pushing us potentially even higher into that trend, identifying that potential breakout much earlier using that short-term crossover combined with momentum. Get a really nice full picture on the possibility of breaking through that resistance level. So let's see. Hey, Hiren, glad to have you in today. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry, I just saw a few new names pop in through the chat. So thanks guys for joining. All right, you guys are big on transportation today. Let's jump into JBLU. Any specific questions on this one? I think this was David that provided this ticker symbol. So thank you, David, for that. Let me know, did you have any specific questions or you just want to run through full analysis here? I'm okay with either. You just let me know. All right, let's dive on in to get started with our 4 points of confirmation. So where are we on the 4 points of confirmation? We don't quite have a crossover, right? Not at least to the bullish side on the medium term cross. So let's do this. Let's switch on over to our short term crossover. So here we have it. Our short term crossover, in fact, is bullish here. So if you notice, I can probably zoom in a little bit closer here for you guys. You can see the blue lines just coming on up to cross over. So the key here is, do we have additional confirmation? Now, if you notice, we also saw a very similar scenario happening right here, but we weren't right up against support either, right? And also to our predictive differences are kind of a mixed bag at that point. I say a mixed bag because, really only 1, maybe 2 is going up. The other, the long term is at least sideways. So we would expect consolidation, not full confirmation here, right? And again, price action, if you notice, the very bottom of that candle, if you guys can see, is the wick. And so the wick is right here and support is here, right? So we still have some room to fall, if you will, right? So not necessarily a support bounce scenario happening here because price didn't come down and touch support. But what are we seeing currently, right? We can actually see that price did in fact come down and touch support, right? In fact, it hit the previous support levels, all right? This is the importance of support and resistance, because with previous price levels that are establishing these support zones, it's going to impact future price action. I don't know, but as a trader, I'm sure that you would want to know where you need to be a little bit more cautious or where a certain level is going to impact price. And so knowing that ahead of time can really help you plan and prepare. So if we take our support level that's sitting right here, you can see, did we close 2 days below this level? And I will do my best to draw a line kind of pushing us out through here. And you can see, do we have 2 closes below? Now, yes, on this day we did close below. The bottom of that red candle would be the close, right? But the top of the green box on this candle would be the close up here. So do we have 2 consecutive closes below support? No, right? So that would not verify that break through the support level. In fact, this would support the theory of a potentially bullish bounce off of that support level. So at that point, look down at your neural index, you can see the possibility of that bounce off of support. And then, of course, we have the predictive differences. 2 of them are coming up nice and steep, right? And moving together simultaneously. So a little bit stronger confirmation here than what we saw back here. Back here, you probably would have said, that's a little too risky, right? At least hopefully, based on our analysis thus far. But currently, we've got some room to run and a bounce off of that potential support level. So expectation of a potentially bullish move today, kind of there, right there, sitting on the horizon. Now, the predictive trade candle, of course, is bearish, so you would have wanted to be a little bit more cautious here. But that's, again, up to the individual trader themselves as well. So, yes, Mo, I will absolutely get there. Volatility, a great way to assess volatility is going to be like your Bollinger Bands. Is a great way to assess volatility. There's lots of really great volatility indicators, and we have many of them in VantagePoint. What volatility indicators are you guys using to assess volatility in your positions, or be on the right side of volatility, I should say? Let me know in the chat, and then we'll take a look at some of those as well. Did that answer questions about JetBlue? All right, so moving on, I promised some analysis on the quantum sector of the market, and I say sector of the market because we saw a lot of breakouts in that area of the market here recently, and some just identified very, very recently, but you can start to see that movement happening where money is flowing into particular areas of the markets by using ETFs. I don't know who trades ETFs on the session today, if you don't trade ETFs, let me know, because you're definitely going to want to pay attention to this next, little session here, part of the session. So let's open up. This is Defiance Quantum ETF. So QTUM is the ticker symbol. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. And this is an ETF that really follows quite a few of the kind of larger quantum assets that are out there in the markets. And so right here, we can see that this market has just been on a run for quite some time. Now, an ETF is not a singular asset. It is a group of assets that are going to be traded on one market. So you're not just trading one stock. You're not trying to just pick the biggest mover. You're kind of placing your bets on all of them in the basket of stocks, okay? So yes, ATR is a volatility indicator. Bollinger Bands is a volatility indicator. Keltner channels are volatility indicators. Those are all several indicators that we have here in VantagePoint, and they are powered by the artificial intelligence and predictive as well. So we can certainly take a look. Now, if you remember our initial kind of assessment on many of these markets, we talked about those support and resistance channels that happen. And when we see those support and resistance channels, we get this consolidation or this compression of price. And so with the compression of price comes the potential for a breakout, right? And again, where do we see the breakout happening is typically when we're able to break above the two resistance levels. We can see even just rapid price movement happening here. But we do also have the ability to measure that volatility. And you know what? I'm just going to pull up. Let's just go with Bollinger Bands, because Bollinger Bands are great. Again, several of these indicators are additional add-on indicators, but Bollinger Bands are going to tell you where price is being compressed and where price is expected to expand. Basically, when is this spring expected to just kind of bounce off, right? And break out. And so this is where we see the Bollinger Bands. When we have tight Bollinger Bands like this is telling us price has been compressed. Again, imagine that spring. So the spring is being compressed. And then, of course, when is price expected to pop? Well, when the Bollinger Bands pop out, right? So then you can start to see the Bollinger Bands expand here. Also, another signal on the Bollinger Bands here is when price action hits that upper band. When price action hits that upper band, we now have not only our 4 points of confirmation, but we also have volatility on your side as well, confirmed by the directional movement of that trend. And so price hitting that upper Bollinger Band tells us the volatility is increasing, and look at that price movement we see happening there. I'm just going to grab my crosshairs, and just from the point where Bollinger Bands that hits, right? Let's just grab our profit calc tool. And of course you can do this to draw trend lines or profit calc yourself. I'm just going to draw to yesterday. I know today things were up again, but you've got a really nice move in just a couple of days, a nice breakout. Now, why do I bring up ETFs? Well, because if this basket of stocks is doing well, then you know that money is probably flowing into that area of the market as well. So if you want to hedge your bets, I mean, why not go find other assets that are similar to this or that are traded within that ETF to take those individual positions as well. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that, right? But I don't know, follow the money, right? Might be an old adage that has worked well for many traders, right? So if we take a look at some of the other assets in the quantum area, these ETFs can really give you a really good heads up into what is moving in the market. So you can see we really saw that crossover back on 9.5. Let's take a look at some of the other quantum stocks. Somebody give me a quantum stock in the chat if you can. Thank you, David. Perfect. I'm glad that we answered all of those questions for you. Okay, how about, let's do, oh, sorry guys, I'm just looking through the chat here. Okay, let's go IonQ, right? That's one. So we can certainly look that up. Well, anybody wanna take a swing at this one, right? So you can see on IonQ here, we certainly saw that crossover way back here, right? So let's look for those 4 points of confirmation. In fact, if you really wanted the earlier entry, since we're talking about finding these opportunities earlier, you actually, in fact, had confirmation here back on 822. All right, so that could have been one potential movement from here up until we see our predictive differences or the strength starting to waver and that new resistance level established. At that point, you may have taken profits or maybe taken out a small portion of profits and then potentially waited for the pullback, right? So that's where the pullback reverts back down to that support level, or it might even revert back down to a previous moving average as well. So you can also see if we put on our triple cross, again, using that darker blue line, and this is where pullbacks come into play. So if you did enter into that move a little earlier, you can see the move that you would have potentially gained. And then, of course, once we start to lose strength with our predictive differences, establishing that resistance, and of course the neural strength, the neural index pushing down or giving us a bearish reading, you may have chosen to take profits. Where does price revert back to? Notice that T cross long level, again, overlapping with support. The last time we saw this happen, we saw a nice bounce off of that level. So where then do we start to see our renewed strength coming in? Right here, right? Right as we get a new fresh crossover, being able to kind of take advantage of that new renewed bullish momentum or shift in the trend, right? So again, price got compressed here, right? We had a nice move from, let's see this date. I forgot what it was. Sorry, 822 up until 828. Maybe you got out 829 if you wanted, if you were hopeful, maybe 9.2, right? But after that run, after that breakout, then we had a period of kind of cool down, right? And then getting ready for that next breakout. So those areas where volatility is low could also be opportunities to maybe add to your position as well before the next potential breakout. And so here is where we see that signal. Okay, now the breakout is expected to the upside again after the pullback. After the pullback, do you add to that bullish position, right? So knowing where that pullback level is essential. And then where we're expected to bounce, support right here, followed by the renewed bullish movement and strength behind this trend can give you really good confidence of that expected breakout. Now, keep in mind, QTUM, which was our ETF, was also moving on 9.5, right? So we already saw from the ETF that money was flowing into this market again. And so further confirmation, now we not only have indicator confirmation, but now you have market confirmation as well. So you're finding assets that are moving in the sectors that are moving as well. So really, really important concept to be able to follow the money and confirm with those markets, and confirmation in technical analysis equals confidence. And a confident trader certainly does not let the emotions get in their way, right? At least a smart one. So let's take a look at a couple of others. Of course, this has just been like a great run, managing this position. Easy, right on through. You can see the blue line stays above the black. It's maintained its bullish expectation. Now, if you wanted, I'll just take a quick second because we have a few extra minutes here, but you can see Bollinger Bands start to really expand at this point. And you also see that not only do we have the expansion on the Bollinger Bands right here, they squeeze together, right? And then they start to expand. Price action hit that upper band, and that just takes off like a rocket, right? Who doesn't want to break out like that? Okay, so we've identified some newer breakouts, some breakouts that we've been able to identify through market rotation, sector rotation, volatility and also momentum as well. We're just rocking and rolling through these breakouts. Hopefully it's been a breakout session for many of you. But let's take a look at some other ones. You guys typed in some ticker symbols that I'm just seeing. I'm sorry, I had to scroll back through. But let's take a look at QS. Absolutely. Who? ENVX, is that right? Okay, cool. We'll take a look at that as well. Okay, so who had the question on QuantumScape? Perfect. Mitchell's. Okay, fantastic. Anything specific or just kind of looking for that potential breakout, right? All right, so the first things first, confirmation, right? That's probably the greatest thing about VantagePoint is it gives you a systematic process, all right? If you don't know where to start in your trade day, start with the 4 points of confirmation. If you don't know what the 4 points of confirmation are and you're a VantagePoint user, then maybe attend our VantagePoint University sessions where we teach a lot of that and go over these indicators in even more detail. And if you just don't know what the 4 points of confirmation are because you don't know what VantagePoint is, then visit VantagePointForecast.com so you can learn about it. But checking our 4 points of confirmation, do we have a crossover? And on the short-term expectation, we do. And we already know at this point that this market or this area, oh, I'm sorry, this is ENVX. I'm sorry. Let me jump back over to QuantumScape. Yeah, sorry, I got a little cross-eyed there for a second. You look at as many charts as I do. But where do we have that first point of confirmation? On QS, it's going to jump back a little bit. It's the beauty of doing these things live, guys, right? I do, I'm not artificial intelligence, so I do occasionally make a mistake. That's why I rely on the AI for sure. All right. So do we have an area of consolidation where our volatility is compressing? We do, right? I hope everybody sees at this point. You can see this resistance and support. And look at price just toggling back and forth between this level. So then where do we have the potential for a breakout? Well, our crossover goes to the upside. We've got bullish confirmation here, and our predictive differences are trending up as well. Now, we also see that we do have a big gap up the next day. So that might have been a signal for many of you. And if you don't do any sort of gap analysis, know this at least. Take this away from the session today. When we have a big gap up from one day to the next, you want to be very cautious of a potential pullback. All right. And this goes right into, exactly what we're talking about today is breakouts and pullbacks. And so when you have a big gap, it oftentimes will come back to refill that gap. Okay. So who has had that happen to them before? You're like, oh my gosh, this gapped up. I better get in right away, only to see it pull back where you could have potentially gotten in at a better price point. I bet you everybody is probably going to raise their hand, right? Okay. So if that's happened to you, which you don't have to tell me, it's fine. We know, and I know you know. So after that pullback, right, again, do we have a bounce off of support? So this is where strategy really comes into play, where do you have that bounce off of support with the bullish crossover? And we do. In fact, the next day, it doesn't happen until the next day here, where we see that bounce off of support with the crossover, the bullish confirmation here from our predictive differences, the neural index. So yeah, at this point, we do have that confirmation. Here's the great thing about the bounce off of support, as well as you have a potential profit target. Who knows what I'm going to say is the profit target? If you've seen any of my sessions, right? Probably the first profit target or first kind of goal level would be resistance, right? So do you have enough runway for you to really say, hey, this is enough bang for my buck, if you will, right? Is there enough movement within that asset for you to, risk your capital? And so if you take from, again, that crossover point to resistance, this is where the profit calc tool comes in really handy. You can do this looking at future positions as well. And for a market that's up 23.16% in 4 days, I don't know a trader that's going to tell you that's not enough. I'll go find something better, right? So as you see that bounce, it's also important to assess the profit potential as well. And then if it breaks out beyond that, then fantastic. It did better than you expected. I don't know any trader that's going to be upset about that either, right? So as we sit here at resistance, the question is, do we have enough to really push us through? And that would be tough on this one. QS, we may kind of be a little riskier because we are up against resistance. We do have the red neural index and then the predictive differences starting to come down. So if we did push up against that resistance, this is where you'd have to assess if you're at profit, maybe you protect some of those profits, and if it continues or if it confirms the breakout through resistance, maybe then you scale back into the position. Those are strategic decisions that you can utilize to navigate through the support and resistance levels and also the breakout as well. So we've been sitting at that breakout level right here. Let's see what our Bollinger Bands have to say about that as well. So we're still touching that upper band. So that would give us kind of confirmation that we would expect to see some bullish movement from a volatility standpoint as well, because the top of our trade candle, the wick, is still piercing that upper band is what we would call it. So basically, is any part of the candle touching that upper band? And we can see, yes, in fact it is. So that would be the one indication. And then of course we do have a higher low expected as well. But again, a little riskier there. So you may want to, put on some additional caution to your trade strategy or trade plan on that. That's the beautiful thing about VantagePoint is it's going to give you the signals, but you as the trader can make that decision. It's not going to automatically do it for you. But creating that trade process and having a disciplined trade plan, you can very quickly make those judgment calls for your own trade strategy. So let's jump on over to ENVX. What was the question on ENVX? I think this is probably the last one we'll have time for today, but that's A-okay with me. Well, I could be here all night just assessing ticker symbols. But I know everybody's probably going to be hungry for dinner here coming up here soon. But if we take a look at our current trend, we do have a bullish crossover, right? We also have our bullish neural index, right? And then the predictive differences are also bullish as well. So with that confirmation, you already see that we do have some bullish expectation and confirmation, good confirmation of that potential entry point as well. Now, we do have a little room to run before we hit resistance, but it is sitting right there at resistance. So would you be a little bit more cautious at that point? What would you do as a trader? Ask yourself that question. What would you do here as a trader if you see a crossover with confirmation but right up against resistance? Do you take that trade? Do you take that trade and maybe put on some tighter risk parameters around it because you know it's a little bit more uncertain? Do you manage your risk by maybe taking a partial position there? These are all questions that you can ask yourself and should be a part of your trade strategy. If you can't answer those, then maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board on your trade strategy to define that discipline for yourself so you're not questioning yourself. You've already got a plan of action. All right. So as we hit our resistance, right, do we expect to break resistance? Our 4 points of confirmation still give us nice bullish strength. There's nothing telling us that we would expect bearishness here at resistance. So a little bit more confirmation than what we saw on QS as well. But let's take a look at some additional indicators here. We can add on the stochastics and the not percent R. We use stochastics and RSI here. We'll just add those to our chart and whew, all right. So if you were ever questioning whether or not you're going to break through resistance or support inversely, right? But resistance in this case, momentum can be a really, really great confidence booster. All right. So as you can see, RSI is actually giving us a really strong signal where it's breaking above that lower threshold. This lower threshold is in fact oversold. So that tells you that the asset is fairly oversold and there's a potential for a reversal. When does that expect to happen? Well, timing will help you here when it crosses above that threshold. So when we come from an extreme and bounce back up above that threshold, this is giving us a nice bullish signal here. Now, take that application and just roll it right on over to stochastics, and you can see stochastics is coming up from its lower oversold region, giving us good confirmation of that potential shift in bullish momentum. So crossover timing along with price action, along with your predictive differences, marry that up with momentum, and you could also add on the volatility for that expectation. And you can see yesterday we hit that upper band on the Bollinger Bands. Let me just pull this out because I don't think that I could have done this any better, guys. But you can see that our our price action yesterday hit that upper Bollinger Band, giving us nice confirmation from that asset on the Bollinger Band and volatility. So now that you can see how using the 4 points of confirmation as well as additional supporting kind of documentation, supporting facts to back up those trends, identifying a breakout becomes really easy, and timing that breakout becomes much more confident. So, certainly take this, apply to your own trade strategies, but you really should be assessing any type of a position from multiple points of view to make sure that you get that big full narrative and that you have as many facts as possible to give yourself as much confidence as possible when you're taking any position in the market. So position yourself on the right side and make sure you have confidence to do so. Manage your risk accordingly. And, we'll maybe dive into some risk management on our next session. So we will see you guys there. I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Don't forget, please like and subscribe to the channel. That just helps us to reach even more traders that might need this education and help as well. So I certainly hope that each and every one of you got at least 1 or 2 new pieces of information out of today. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the week and weekend ahead.